On chapter 14 of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the Katamrita, as it's called in India. And the chapter name is Instruction to Vaishnavas and Brahmos. So just teachers of other sects of Hinduism. And it's Sunday, September 23rd, 1883. Sri Ramakrishna is sitting in his room. So if you've been there, you know that he's in that room on the corner of the temple with the circular, semicircular portico that he talks about that opens out onto the Ganges. And then the other entrance to his room. So if I'm sitting with my back to the Ganges, on the left is a door that goes out of his room, and right across the way from there is the Nahabat that Holy Mother lived in. And straight in front of me is just a solid wall with a door on the far right that goes out into the courtyard where the Kali temple is and the different Shiva temples are and the temple to Krishna. It's a big open courtyard area over there. And then in this little corner of his room to the right here is where his cot is, and his bigger cot or bed is there also, and a little table. And then there's pictures hanging all around the room, about three on each wall, three or so on each wall. And whenever he mentions a picture, it's one of those hanging up there. There's a picture of a sadhu smoking hemp. There's a picture, I think, of Jesus, maybe, and a picture of, anyway, he has lots of different pictures up there. So here we are. Instructions to the Vaishnavas and the Brahmos, Sunday, September 23rd, 1883. Sri Ramakrishna sitting in his room at Dakshineshwar with Rakal, M, and other devotees. They would all be sitting on the floor in front of him. He'd be sitting on the lower couch, usually, unless he had just gotten up. Hazra sat on the porch outside. The master was conversing with the devotees. Master to a devotee. Narendra doesn't like even you nowadays. To M. Why didn't he come to see me at Adar's house? How versatile Narendra is. He is gifted in singing, in playing on instruments, and in studies. He is independent and doesn't care about anybody. The other day he was returning to Calcutta with Captain in his carriage. Captain begged Narendra to sit beside him, but he took the seat opposite. He didn't even look at Captain. So he's just boasting about Vivekananda really just being a man of such integrity and having such a strong inner presence, strong inner life, that he's just detached from the externals. You know, he doesn't put himself in situations of obligation or let any of the hooks of society grab him. He stays independent, stays free. I think that's what he's talking about with that little interlude with Captain, where Captain wanted to sit next to him on his side of the carriage. And so, those tendrils of affection, I want you to sit here. And Vivekananda, no, I'm ever free. I don't have any obligations because of other feelings like that, or societal obligations or politeness rules and whatnot. He's free from that. What can a man achieve through mere scholarship? What is needed is prayer and spiritual discipline. Prayer and spiritual discipline. So the prayer is that presence, that communing, that sense of being in the presence of the divine. So to the degree that you're aware of being in that presence, to that degree, you're enjoying prayer. And then spiritual discipline, which is the practice of being strong, doing what you know is right. Sticking to the things that you have made vows about, sticking to things that you have said were important to you, that you wanted to do and practice. So just knowing things, just being, just memorizing scriptures, just speaking Sanskrit, just doing all of these different things, that's not the important thing. It's how you're doing them. Are you in the presence? Are you aware of God in where you are and in the situation that you're in? Are you aware of the divine, and are you in a state of communion? Are you in a state of communion with the beloved in the moment, in this moment? Are you recognizing this moment as being your beloved? And then he says this that it's not a matter of just the knowing these things; it's a matter of being these things. I really like the statement that it's not a matter of what you do in this life; it's a matter of how you do it. Anything done with love is spiritual and will bring you to a better place. Anything done with me or mine in the mind will bring you to a worse place. It won't be satisfying in the end. So that's a good choice, a good way to make a choice. Say, am I doing this for love or am I doing this for me and mine? And the minimize the me and mine and encourage the love, and you will have a fulfilled life. That's the nature of it, because that's your nature. Your nature is loving. And so even if you have a terribly boring job in a terribly boring office in a cubicle among hundreds, if you remember while you're in that cubicle that you're there to love, then you can be that person in the office who's aware of everybody's needs and remembers people's birthdays and makes sure to bring cards and to inquire about people's health. And when somebody was sick or when someone's family is sick, you're the one that knows about it. So your job is never about what you're doing. Your job is always about how you're doing what you're doing. And so in that way, we can take a terribly mundane job and make it endlessly fulfilling, because it's the presence of God and the interaction with the presence of God and living life in the light of the divine that makes life worth living, that gives value to being. So what can a man achieve through mere scholarship? What is needed is prayer and spiritual discipline. Gauri of Indesh was both a scholar and a devotee. He was a worshiper of the Divine Mother. Now and then he would be overpowered with spiritual fervor. When he chanted a hymn to the Mother, the pundits would seem like earthworms beside him. I too would become overcome with ecstasy. That is that marvelous thing. There's something about having that inner integrity. If you've got that divine presence consciously within, and you're drawn, and you're in that space, and you're living a life that's conducive to maintaining that purity, to maintaining that experience of bliss in the heart, then when you say something, boy, it has a power to it. It has a strength to it. I remember being at an interfaith meeting with Swami Vedananda once, a while back, long ago, actually, many years now. And usually at those interfaith meetings, everybody's talking over everybody else, at the table. It's a little bit unruly. And Vedananda would hardly ever say anything. He would, most of the time was in silence there. But I noticed that any time that he said something, the entire room quieted down. Whenever he spoke, he was the only one speaking. And it wasn't that he demanded that. It wasn't that anything of that sort at all. It was simply because he was a man of few words and a man of intense integrity and uprightness, that when he spoke, people wanted to hear it. They wanted to hear what that was saying. His words had power because of the life behind them. And so this is the importance of being true to our practice. This is the importance of letting Mother into the heart and letting her dwell in us and living in awareness of that, because then we develop our own atmosphere within our own temple, within our own body. We create an atmosphere of the sacred, of the holy. And people experience that. People get comforted just by sitting with us. People get comforted just by being in the room with us, because that's the nature of God. And when you live a life with that God awareness, it's helpful to the world. That's why Ramakrishna said, as one spiritual seeker sitting at the top of a mountain in deep meditation does more good to the world than 1,000 people volunteering in the hospitals. So your value is in your relationship with the divine. And to the extent that you allow that value, which God has placed there by default, so you're always valuable because the image of the beloved is within you. To the degree that manifests, to the degree you're living up to that degree, you're living up to your potential of how you can affect this world in a beautiful way. So he's saying that whenever he chanted a hymn, whenever he chanted one of the scriptures, that the pundits, the academics, would just look like, brittle or earthworms next to him. They were just inconsequential. What they had to see, say, or seem so little and so unimportant. And he says, but if I was there, even I too would become overcome with ecstasy. So that's the value of holy company, is that when we're all in tune, we get encouragement from each other. That togetherness raises that vibration in us. So that's the value of holy company, the value of being inspired by one another. But he wasn't always like that. It says at first he was a bigoted worshiper of Shakti. He used to pick up tulsi leaves with a couple of sticks so as to not touch them with his finger. Those tulsi leaves are what are used in worshiping Shiva. And so he was a Shakti worshiper. And so he wouldn't even pick up a tulsi leaf, wouldn't even pick up a basil leaf, because they belonged to Shiva, and you do it with a pair of sticks. That's how bigoted he was about somebody else's practice, right? So as to not to touch them with his fingers. Everyone laughs. Then he went home. When he came back, he didn't behave that way anymore. He gave remarkable interpretations of Hindu mythology. He would say that the 10 heads of Ravana represented the 10 organs. Kumbhakarna was the symbol of tamas, Ravana of rajas, and Vibhishananda of sattva. That was why Vibhishana obtained favor with Rama. So he's just had this marvelous ability to read the scriptures and to bring out these deeper meanings, to bring out these wonderful interpretations from them, these wonderful ideas out of them, things that might not obviously appear to you when you first read it. And that's available to all of us. If we live in that company, if we live in the presence of Mother, then we're all like that. That's one of the gifts that Mother gives. Is just when you look at the scriptures, you understand them. When you read them, they say to you what you need to hear. It's a direct communication. It's a direct understanding with your beloved. After the master's midday meal, while he was resting, Ram, Tarak, and some other devotees arrived from Calcutta. Nitya Gopal, Tarak, and several others were staying with Ram, a householder's disciple of the master. Nitya Gopal was always in an exalted spiritual mood. It was this kind of thing that I remember reading when I was young, when I first started out, and I would get so excited because in so many places you read things that's like that. Nitya Gopal is just a guy, just a normal person, and he has actually come to a state where he's always in an exalted spiritual mood. And this is what gave me that idea that's such that fervent encouragement in the first few years of my practice, where I really thought every time I sat down to meditate that this could be the last time, that I was going to realize God this time. And I really try to get back to that kind of thinking. Well, now actually I've gone a little bit of a different direction. Now I'm just trying not to worry about it. Now I'm just sitting to enjoy God. But back then, I just had this notion that any moment this was going to happen, and I was sitting for long times, not as a sense of austerity, not as a sense of making myself control myself, but because I was afraid that if I quit, that maybe I had only been 1 minute away from realization, and I quit 1 minute early. So I would sit there just riveted in the experience of meditation, just with this expectation that at any moment I was going to realize God. And there's a real beauty to that faith. There's a real beauty to living that way. I think it's better to grow past it. I think Mother's taken me to a different space that I think is better than wanting anything, which is just being able to accept grace, being able to accept presence, and enjoying your salary before you get the job, as it were. So Tarak's mind too was always indrawn. He seldom exchanged words with others. So you see, this is a notion that the more spiritual we become, the more quiet we become, the more settled we become inside. There's not as much noise from us as a person. And we see that when Thakur describes it, he says when people first sit down to eat dinner, everybody's chit-chatting, and you can hear the clanking of the silverware and the clanking of the dishes and everything going back and forth. But by the time it gets to the dessert, after everybody's had their glass of wine and their salad and their dinner, and they're sitting having, taking their payash in their fingers, he says at that point, nobody's talking. All you hear is the sup sup of them licking their fingers, licking the pudding off of their fingers. So this is what it is for spiritual life. When we get to the dessert, when you actually get to the point after maybe many years of practice for some people, and maybe sooner than others for others, but when you get to that place where you've found the temple, you found the shrine in your heart, and you've managed to sit there and taste just even a slightest touch of that bliss, then that's when the inside world becomes more desirous than the outside world. You value that moment of bliss almost viciously inside, and so you really tend to stay away from the things that draw you out of that space. The lust and greed and the noise of the world. You're just not interested in that. It's like it's just such a wonderful contentment to sit and feel love, to have that active love just constantly emanating that beautiful aroma of peace, and to find that place. And so this is what he's talking about here. So Tarek's mind too was always indrawn, meaning he was always focusing his attention on the shrine in the heart and just sitting there in that joy. Ram looked after their physical needs. Rakal now and then spent a few days at Adar's house. Ram to the master, we have been taking lessons on the drum. Master, Nitya Gopal too? Ram, no sir, he plays a little. And Tarak? Ram, oh, he knows a good deal. Master, then he won't keep his eyes on the ground so much. If the mind is directed to something else, it doesn't dwell deeply on God. Ram, I've been studying the drum only for accompanying the kirtan. Master to M, I hear that you too are taking singing lessons. Is that so? M, no, sir. I just open my mouth on every now and then. Master, have you practiced that song, "O Mother, Make Me Mad with Your Love"? If you have, please sing it. The song expresses my ideal perfectly. The conversation turned to Hazra's hatred for certain people, which Sri Ramakrishna did not like. Master to the devotees, I used frequently to visit a certain house at Kamarpakor. The boys of that family were of my age. The other day they came here and they spent 2 or 3 days with me. Their mother, like Hazra, used to hate people. Then something happened to her foot and gangrene set in. On account of that foul smell, no one could enter her room. I told the incident to Hazra and asked him not to hate anyone. This is a very direct linking of what it's like for somebody who's just got that negative attitude about people, that's always pointing out people's faults or pointing out what's not going on or who's not doing what right, or who's always looking over the fence to see what their neighbor's up to, becoming religious and not spiritual. And he says that, gangrene is when your flesh is rotting while it's still on your body. It's a horrible disease. And that's literally what it is. It's that the flesh begins to rot on your body because of a lack of blood flow or something broken or something like that. And so that stench of rotting meat, you know how that is. Oh my God, if you don't, you're lucky. That's a horrible smell. And so he says, he's indicating that this woman, that, she was always in that negative state and always bad talking everybody. And God inflicted her with this terrible disease to show her what she actually was becoming, what she actually was being in the world, that somebody who's just always putting off a foul smell, somebody who's always just saying negative things and talking about others' faults and whatnot. It's like that stench of rotting meat in the room. So he says, don't hate anyone. Don't be that way. Don't be that person. Toward evening, as Sri Ramakrishna was standing in the northwest corner of the courtyard, he went into samadhi. In those days, the master remained almost always in an ecstatic state. He would lose consciousness of the world at the slightest suggestion from outside. But for scant conversation with visiting devotees, he remained in an indrawn mood and was unable to perform his daily worship and devotions. That's the very high state, a very high state. It means you are so absorbed in the inner shrine, the presence of God within you, that you just can't even be pulled out. And samadhi means that you're fully in that presence, and the body has become almost secondary, at least to you. It's not you anymore. You don't own it. You don't see it as being yours. You're in that infinite state, that immortal state, that state where you're absorbed in Satchitananda, absorbed in love, absorbed in wisdom, absorbed in being. And that in that state, when you're that intensely in there, you can't focus enough on the senses and on the body to do even your simple worships, in the temple, your rituals and whatnot. And that's how you know when it's time for you to transcend those things, for you to leave those things behind. He says, when you say the word of God once and your hair stands up on end, that's when you're moving in that direction. Coming down to the relative world, he began to talk to the Divine Mother, still standing where he was. Right? So even you have to come down to the relative world to talk to God. That mature prayer, ripened prayer is silence. Just like two old couples who have been together for 50 or 60 years, just sitting there. They've already told all their stories. They already told each other all their jokes. No, talking is not necessary anymore. Now it's just the comfort of being in the company of each other. You've got 60 years together where you both have been true to each other. You've been working on that relationship. You've been dedicated to each other's welfare. And, as an old person, what is there in all the things that the young run around looking for? You are just content just to sit there and enjoy the 60-year-old relationship with your beloved. And so this is how it is in that deep internal spiritual state. It's like once you've touched that space and have been able to hold the mind on it and not let the mind go wandering after the changing things. Once you're established, that's what you would call it. Once you're established in that place, there's no pulling you out. You have found your home. So coming down to the relative world, he began to talk to the Divine Mother, still standing where he was. "Oh, Mother," he said, "worship has left me, and japa also. Please see, Mother, that I do not become an inert thing. Let my attitude toward God be that of a servant toward the Master. Oh, Mother, let me talk about you and chant your holy name. I want to sing your glories. Give me a little strength of body that I may move about, that I may go to places where your devotees live and to sing your name." It's really a sweet prayer. He doesn't want to be one of these sadhus who's just absorbed in a spiritual mood all the time and is inert. Is just sitting there deep, deep, deep within himself. He's like, "No, I want to dance with you. I want to play with you. I want to sing your names. I want to clap my hands in your presence. I want to talk to the devotees about you. I want to enjoy being with you. Please don't just make me absorbed so much that I just am completely indrawn and inert from the outside in." In the morning, Sri Ramakrishna had been to the Kali temple to offer flowers at the mother's feet. Continuing, the master said, "Oh, Mother, I offered flowers at your feet this morning. I thought, that is good. My mind is again going back to formal worship. Then why do I feel like this now? Why are you turning me into a sort of inert thing?" The moon had not yet risen. It was dark out at night. The master, still in an abstracted mood, sat on the small couch in his room and continued his talk with the Divine Mother. He said, "Why this special discipline of the Gayatri? Why this jumping from this roof to that? Who told him to do it? Perhaps he is doing it of his own accord. Well, he will practice a little of that discipline." So here he gives some background. He's talking about Ishan, apparently. He says the previous day, Sri Ramakrishna had discouraged Ishan about Vedic worship, saying that it was not suitable for the Kali Yuga, meaning this day and age. So those old Vedic rituals, those very complicated pujas and whatnot that many people like to do. He said those are not really beneficial in this age, because society doesn't support that. Society today, he says in this day and age, our God is our stomach, which means we're just always having to work for food and work for our shelter, and that we're so busy and so drawn out of ourselves that there's no time to do these old rituals, and that they're not of the same value now that we're in this Kali Yuga. And in the Kali Yuga, the best path is devotion. The best path is to sing God's names and to pray and to sit in communion with him. The master said to M, "Are these my fancies, or are they real?" M remained silent with wonder at the master's intimate relationship with the Divine Mother. He thought she must be within us as well as without. Indeed, she must be very near us, or why should the master speak to her in a whisper? It's kind of a naive question. The sweetness of M's heart there. Well, God must be really close if Thakur is talking to her and he's just whispering. She must be close indeed. And I think that that's the beauty of practice. The more you contemplate and open up to the truth, the more you realize how unnecessary words are between you and God. That God is so intimately engaged with you that he sees your thoughts as you're seeing your thoughts. He knows your emotions and feelings as they're being experienced, because he has never left you. And so he's intimately aware of your life. And so prayer becomes an opening. It's an invitation. It's just this constant letting yourself know more and more how intimate God is with you, so that words just get in the way. Thoughts just get in the way. It's just sitting completely inundated through and through with this presence of love, this presence of wisdom, this presence of your immortality. Wednesday, September 26th, 1883. There were very few devotees with the master, for most of them came on Sundays. Rakal and Latu were living with him the greater part of the time. M arrived in the afternoon and found the master seated on the small couch. So that was the couch in this corner to the right, lower, sitting next to his bed. M arrived that afternoon and found the master seated on the small couch. The conversation turned to Narendra, to Swami Vivekananda. Master to M, "Have you seen Narendra lately?" With a smile, "He said of me, he still goes to the Kali temple, but he will not when he truly understands." Vivekananda was saying that about the master. Vivekananda was a strong Advaitist at that point. He went through many different moods in his development. For a while he was an atheist, and then he was an Advaitist, and so he used to make fun of the master for different things, because he didn't believe in God as mother initially. It wasn't till Ramakrishna gave him a direct experience of the mother in the shrine that he, sat in the shrine all night that night singing Matvam Hi Tara, that wonderful Bengali hymn, about the presence of mother. And so Vivekananda is saying about Thakur, he still goes to the Kali temple, but he will not when he truly understands. His people are very much dissatisfied with him because he comes here now and then. The other day he came here in a hired carriage and Surendra paid for it. Narendra's aunt almost had a row with Surendra about it. The master left the couch and went to the northeast veranda, where Hazra, Kishori, Rakal, and a few other devotees were sitting. Master to M. How is it that you are here today? Have you no school? M. Our school closed today at 1:30. Oh, why so early? Vidyasakar visited the school. He owns the school, so the boys get a half-day holiday when he comes. The master. Why doesn't Vidyasagar keep his word? If one who holds to truth and looks on woman as his mother does not realize God, then Tulsi is a liar. If a man holds to truth, he will certainly realize God. The other day, Vidyasagar said that he would come here and visit me, but he hasn't kept his word. Right? So this is bringing back that point again, this importance of that integrity, right? A man who lives in truth. What is a man who lives in truth? What he says, what he does, and what he thinks are all in alignment. That's living in a state of truth, right? And he says, if one holds to truth, if one holds to that kind of integrity and looks on woman as his mother, which means that he doesn't engage the identity with the body to define his relationships with the world around him, meaning he's free or she is free of lust. If a man holds to truth, he will certainly realize God. The other day, Vidyasagar said he would come here and visit, but he hasn't kept his word. There is a big difference between a scholar and a holy man. The mind of a mere scholar is fixed on lust and greed, but the sadhu's mind is on the lotus feet of Hari. A scholar says one thing and does another, but it is quite different in the matter with the sadhu. The words and actions of a man who has given his mind to the lotus feet of God are altogether different. In Benares, I saw a young sannyasi who belonged to the sect of Nanak. He was the same age as you. He used to refer to me as the loving monk. His sect has a monastery in Benares. I was invited there one day. I found that the mohant, or the head of them, was like a housewife. I asked him, what is the way? For the Kali Yuga, he said, the path of devotion as enjoined by Narada. He was reading a book. When the reading was over, he recited, Vishnu is in water, Vishnu is on land, Vishnu is on the mountaintop. The whole world is pervaded by Vishnu. At the end, he said, peace, peace, abiding peace. One day he was reading the Gita. He was so strict about his monastic rules that he would not read a holy book while looking at a worldly man. So he turned his face toward me and his back on Mathur, who was also present. It was this holy man who told me of Narada's path of devotion, as suited to the people of the Kali Yuga. So the Narada Bhakti Sutras, we have that book. We might pick that up at some point. That this man is where Thakur got that information that in this age, bhakti is the fastest and the most efficient path. Are not the sadhus of his class followers of the Vedanta? M asked. Master, oh yes, they are, but they also accept the path of devotion. The fact is that in the Kali Yuga, one cannot wholly follow the path laid down in the Vedas. Once a man said to me that he would perform the Purush Charana of the Gayatri. I said, why don't you do that according to the Tantra? In the Kali Yuga, the discipline of Tantra is very efficacious. It is extremely difficult to perform the rites enjoined in the Vedas. Further, at the present time, people lead the life of slaves. It is said that those who serve others for 12 years or so become slaves. They acquire the traits of those they serve. While serving their masters, they acquire the rajas, the tamas, and the spirit of violence, the love of luxury, and the other traits of their masters. Not only do they serve their masters, but they also enjoy a pension after their term of service is over. Now, it says this is another way of talking about what Jesus said, wherever your treasure is, there your heart is also, right? So if you live in serving these other ideals long enough, your heart, part of your heart belongs to them. You get that divided heart inside. And you start taking on the characteristics of that other ideal. You start feeling that greed. You start longing for that more money. You start feeling, that lust all the time. You start seeing people as objects again. All of these things slowly move their way in. And he says they also enjoy a pension after their term of service is over, which means that it becomes that smell of garlic in a cup. Even after it's done being used, it still smells of garlic, and so even in your old age, you become that 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 terrible old man, ogling young girls, or vice versa, if it's such a way. But just a mind that's not free, a mind that's not free. And in old age, that looks particularly hideous. It usually manifests in a bitterness because you've lost the body, you've lost your beauty, you've lost your strength, but you built a life on it, and so now you just sit there bitter and and dark about those things. Once a Vedantic monk came here. He used to dance at the sight of a cloud. He would go into ecstasy of joy over a rainstorm. He would get very angry if anyone went near him when he meditated. One day I came to him while he was meditating, and that made him very cross. He discriminated constantly. Brahman alone is real. The world is illusory. Since the appearance of diversity is due to Maya, he walked about with a prism from a chandelier in his hand. One sees different colors through the prism. In reality, there is no such thing as color. Likewise, nothing exists in reality except for Brahman. But there is an appearance of the manifold because of Maya, egoism. You see, there he is. Right there, we see the master equating Maya and egoism. So your ego is the veil that prevents you from seeing God. And ego forms when you identify with the changing mind, with the world of the changing, and not the heart of the unchanging. So when you put your sense of I, when you decide where are you going to locate yourself in the body, if you locate yourself in the head, where thinking defines you, and you're defined by your thoughts, then you live in the world of multiplicity. There's no security there. There's just constant change and constant distraction. But if you decide to anchor your sense of I in the heart, the unchanging, the quiet, the still, the silent, then the world remains a unity, and you can see through it, as it were. Right? But you see, I always talk about coming up with experiments or coming up with ways of helping you in spiritual life. So you see, the sadhu had a prism, from a chandelier, and he carried it everywhere with him to remind him that even though it looks like there's all these colors, it's really white light before it goes through the prism of the mind. You see, when God's love, the light of love, shines through the mind is the prism that creates the world of the manifold because of the ideas of me and mine. Me and mine is like a prism that splits the singularity, the love of God, into a multiplicity on the other side of mind. And so he carried that with him all the time. But just seeing beauty just instantly reminded him of God, of the beloved. And that's how we live in this world. We don't love a mountain because it's beautiful. We love God because the mountain is beautiful. We look through the beauty at what is beautiful behind it, not the object itself. And that's how we don't get caught in this world. When you realize it's not the mountain you're enjoying, it's not your wife or girlfriend or boyfriend that you love, but that it's God in these things that is attracting your love, that's how you escape. That's how you break attachment. And so when he says that this sadhu was discerning all the time, he was looking at people and he would feel his attraction toward them, and he would say, Brahman alone is real. It is God in there that I am attracted to. Not to that beauty, not to that person, not to that particular. It is God alone that I am attracted to. And that way he kept his mind pure, kept the ideas of me and mine limited by seeing God in all of these things and carrying that prism around with him. He would discriminate while taking his bath at the sight of birds flying in the sky. He knew Sanskrit grammar. He stayed here for 3 days. One day he heard the sound of a flute near the embankment and said that a man who had realized Brahman would go into samadhi at such a sound. Why? Because the flute would indicate the presence of Krishna, indicate the presence of God. And so when you start getting in that space where you've associated with God so many things, you've discerned so much that God is associated with everything coming in through your senses. It's like you hear the sound of a flute and boom, you're in ecstasy. Ramakrishna was in the park and saw that British boy standing there with his leg cocked in three places, sort of like Krishna would stand when he was playing the flute. And boom, he was off into ecstasy. He'd go into a large crowd, he'd see a large crowd, and boom, he'd be into ecstasy. Or he'd be watching the play, and the guy was playing the part of Rama, and boom, he'd be off in ecstasy. Just everything became an indicator for ecstasy. This is what I'm hoping for in that practice of going around looking for vignettes of beauty everywhere during a day, and trying to notice them, and to understand that those are love letters from God, and that there's an infinite number of them in every day. And it's sort of a game of the day. How many can you find today? How many of these beautiful little compositions hidden at the base of a tree trunk, or hidden on the other side of the fire hydrant, or growing in a crack in the stone wall? How many of these beautiful little love cards, these little love notes from your beloved, can you find in a day? And that way the world points to God. When you see the world properly, everything is pointing at God. Nothing is pointing at itself. For the worldly man, everything points at itself. Everything thinks it's important because the worldly man thinks he's important, right? And so he sees everything thinking that same thing about themselves. So the world, he lives in a selfish world. But for the sadhu, where he sees the divine in everything, it's thou, not me, me. He sees God as the most important. And so everything in the universe is pointing him to God. Look at God. Yes, this beauty, look through, see God. He's in there behind it. So practicing this, this is renunciation. You're renouncing the objects, right? And you're understanding that the truth is not in the objects. The truth belongs to itself, and itself is beyond the objects, transcendent to the objects. But somehow those objects, the objects that you feel attracted to, are somehow reflecting one of the names of God. And so discernment is for you to look at the objects that attract you until you hear the name of God in them, till you recognize what it is that you really want from that object. And you come to see that it's not something that the object can give to you. You understand that it is God and God alone that is everywhere present and always perfect, and that everything that you thought you desired was really just one thing: the presence of God. The presence of the divine is all that you have ever wanted. And Thakur says, when you finally get to that point where you realize that all of your desires have always been for one thing and not for many things, then you can know that your realization is very close. Very close. While talking about the monk, the master showed his devotees the manners and movements of a Paramahamsa, someone who knows God, who's a seer of Brahman. The gait of a child, face beaming with laughter, eyes swimming in joy, and body completely naked. Then he again took his seat on the small couch and poured out his soul-enthralling words. So just describing this monk, So somebody who's a knower of God, look at these things here. The gait of a child, walks like a child, little steps, stopping and looking at things, all the time, like noticing all these things. So it's the gait of a child, a face beaming with laughter, just a great joy on his face, always chuckling to himself, always enjoying the joke of this riddle that we're caught in, when you're alone, and when you believe yourself to be alone, the riddle could be frustrating and even cause you anger or impatience and whatnot. But when you're conscious of the presence of God, the riddle is funny. You realize that it's just a sleight of hand, that it's just a riddle, just for fun. And since you're enjoying the one having the fun, you have fun with them also. So a face beaming with laughter, eyes swimming in joy. You can always know a holy man because his eyes are always wet around the outside edges, and there's always a red tint to his eyes, because it's just the bliss of the divine love, the divine laughter is right there. It's so close. He can be so easily inspired, just weeping all weeping all the time at silly things that he himself doesn't understand. A face beaming with laughter, eyes swimming in joy, and a body completely naked, like a child, no self-consciousness at all about his nudity. His nudity does not mean sex, does not mean gender, does not mean any of those things to him. It's just a fact of life. It's not a worry at all, not a care at all. And then he again took his seat on the small couch and poured out his soul enthralling words. Master to M. I learned the Vedanta from Nangta. Brahman alone is real. The world is illusory. The magician performs his magic. He produces a mango tree which even bears mangoes. But this is all sleight of hand. The magician alone is real. M. It seems that the whole of life is a long sleep. This much I understand, that we are not seeing things rightly. We perceive the world with a mind by which we cannot comprehend even the nature of the sky. So how can our perceptions be correct? Master, there's another way of looking at it. We do not see the sky rightly. It looks as if the sky were touching the ground at the horizon. How can a man see correctly? His mind is delirious, like the mind of a typhoid patient. The master sang in his sweet voice, What a delirious fever is this that I suffer from, O mother. Your grace is my only cure. Right? So there's your cure. To live in grace, to accept the grace of mother, to be content in grace, not in your performance, not in your achievement, but just to rest entirely in mother's grace. Continuing, the master said, Truly, it is a state of delirium. Just see how worldly people quarrel among themselves. No one knows what they quarrel about or how they quarrel. Oh, how they quarrel. May such and such a thing befall you. How much shouting, how much abuse. M. I said to Kishori, the box is empty. There is nothing inside. But two men pull at it from either side, thinking the box contains money. Well, the body alone is the cause of all this mischief, isn't it? The Gyanis see all this and say to themselves, what a relief one feels when this pillowcase of the body drops off. The master and M went toward the Kali temple. So see, M is pointing out that understanding that we talked about last week, that every desire comes either from the body or the mind. So he's saying, see, it's the body, the mind, it's that confusion that causes all of this trouble. What a relief that we're going to feel when the source of all of this constant delusion, all of this constant confusion, when that finally ceases, the pull of the body and its longings goes away, the mind and its moods and its conditions goes away. Ooh. That's what death is. Death is, oh, God, at last the toddlers are out of the room. Thank God, some peace and quiet for a moment, and then you see that light standing there in front and you remember grace, right? Mark this in your mind. When your body falls and you see the light in front of you, know at that moment your freedom. Don't think for a moment of what's behind you, what's fallen off, what's been left. And in grace, clothe yourself in grace at that moment, because you will feel more naked than you ever have. The clothing of the body has dropped off. The covering of the mind, the distractions of the mind have fallen off. And you're left in your absolute nakedness before the divine. And if you have done your practice well, and if you have understood that it is the grace of God alone that clothes you, that it is the love of God alone that gives you value, Then you hold those on yourself and you march with dignity and strength right into that light and have your moksha, your eternal freedom. But if you, for one moment, look to the left or look to the right to hide yourself, or to look at what you're missing or what's being left behind, in that moment, you make a choice. You've made a choice not to take God this time. And then you suddenly wake up in a womb somewhere in the thing that you sought shelter in, the thing that you sought refuge in. And then you have to live that life and go through that story until you're set free from that. So understand your confidence, everything is in the grace of God. And in that time when the body drops off and you see that light of consciousness, that pure light of awareness, even though you feel naked and utterly exposed, there's nothing in there that others can't see, because of the grace, because of the love of God. And so if you can hold on to that love, hold on to that grace, and just march right into the light, you'll be with your beloved forever. You'll be free. Master, why should you say such things? This world may be a framework of illusion, but it is also said that it is a mansion of mirth. Let the body remain. One can also turn this world into a mansion of mirth, right? You're making a very good point here. Don't long for death as a spiritual seeker, as if that's something else. That death, even in death, you'll be here and now. Your experience of the moment will be what your experience of this moment is, even in death. Just less a body, less a mind. And so in this world, in your experience of this world, your mind creates the world for you. Don't see it as a world of suffering and of misery. And oh God, I can't wait till I'm rescued, till I'm pulled out of here somehow. Oh, for the sweet rest of death. Thakur's saying, look, you can do that. You certainly are welcome to live a life like that. But what is a life like that going to be? If you're going to make things up about what life is, make up beautiful things. I one time told my mother that, because my mother is a big worrier. And, she was always, anytime we'd go hiking, and my brothers and I was three boys. So, of course, we were always in trouble. And we'd always be at the edge of the cliff, always, wanting to get as close as we could and look over. And mother would always be just panicking, just in a panic. Get back, Ed, calling my father. Get them back, Ed, get them back right now. And my brothers and I would be laughing and, taunting her in a terrible way. But I remember saying one time, I was like, Mom, if you're going to live in a world of make believe, why live in a world where you make believe that we're always falling off a cliff? If you're going to make it up, why not make up a positive world where we never fall off a cliff, or where there is no cliff? It's like, worrying is making up a world in which bad things happen. What a bad habit of mind that is. So if you've got a mind that's always looking for things of anxiety, looking for things to worry about, looking for situations or imagining things not working out, understand you're just making it up. And you don't have to. You can make up a world where everything goes your way, so that you can let go of your anxiety. You can imagine that things all work out well at the end of the week instead of falling apart. You can imagine that your lecture goes great, and not that you got up there and forgot everything that you ever knew. So this is that practice. We talked about it in yesterday's class too, with Holy Mother, just getting ourselves into a place of a general fond regard for life and being. We're just in a general way positive in our outlook about the way things are. Don't get caught up. Thakur didn't like it when M one time said that, and Vivekananda also, they're having a talk and they were saying that the world is going to the dogs, talking about how the youth of the day are so misbehaving and blah, 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 losing their sense of value. And Ramakrishna came over and scolded them. He says, what are you saying? Why do you let your mind see and assume such things, right? You should be assuming light. You should be thinking light. because the story you tell yourself is the story you must live. So keep the story positive. It's part of that always loving yourself, always hoping in yourself, always believing in yourself, never failing, never letting go, never giving up. It's like this is the energy that we put out in our life and in the world. This is a mansion of worth. It's great fun. Sometimes we suffer. Yeah, but it's not forever. It passes. It goes. The new thing comes. The body wasn't always in this condition. The mind wasn't always in this condition. So why would I assume it's always going to be in the condition it is now? It's always changing. Why prefer one over the other? Let it all go. Whatever way it goes, my joy is in the presence of God within me. Let things go this way, let them go that way. I'm going to stay right here. This is my joy. Why should you say such things? This world may be a framework of illusion, but it is also said that it is a mansion of mirth. Let the body remain. One can also turn this world into a mansion of mirth. M. But where is unbroken bliss in this world? Master, with that twinkle in his eye. Yes. Where is it? As if it's lost, as if it's somewhere else. He's like, hey, Dippy Doo, it's inside you. Where is it? What wrong assumption are you making that it's somewhere else besides in you right now, right here? God is everywhere present and always perfect. What are you saying? Where is this mirth, this unbroken bliss? It's riding you right now in your body. Sri Ramakrishna stood in front of the shrine of Kali and prostrated himself before the Divine Mother. M followed him. Then the master sat on the lower floor in front of the shrine room, facing the blissful image, and leaned against the pillar of the Nat Mandir. He wore a red bordered cloth, part of which was on his shoulder and back, and M sat by his side. So we're going to leave them right there, sitting in front of Kali, about to enjoy their worship